Hey friends, I'm Dr. Molly Brinkman. I'm a veterinarian near Nashville, Tennessee, and this is a show for people who love their pets, like to laugh, and realize that life is hard, but dogs and cats help. I love veterinary medicine. I'm probably already obsessed with your pet, and I want you to understand more about both of those things. So welcome to the Dr. Molly Says podcast. Hello, people. Have you missed me? I missed you. It is officially Season 2 of the Dr. Molly Says podcast. Some of you have been asking, hey, where you been? What are you doing, Dr. Molly? Well, a lot has been going on. We have a lot to catch up on. I know you've probably already listened to maybe an interview in this season, but this is our first episode of just us chit-chatting. So here's what's going on. We are in a new location for the podcast right now. This is my building. That is weird to say, but I am in our building. When I say our or we, I mean me and Ryan, my husband, and we bought this building. It's in Cool Springs, which is in Franklin, Tennessee. And this is where we're building our vet practice. And I just couldn't be more excited about that. So if you've missed this on my socials, we're doing it. I am doing it. I am opening the local vets here in Franklin later this year. We're hoping in September. And this is the building where it's happening. It's a large building, so we're building out half of it to be the clinic. And we're in the back half here, which is going to stay offices for now. So this is also where I'm recording the podcast for now. So this is very exciting. If you're not following the local vets at the local vets, you can follow along the journey of construction and planning a veterinary practice. I'm really, like I said, so excited about it. So many things happening in the next 6 months that I am just really looking forward to sharing and walking through with those of you who follow on socials. So we will definitely, I'll give you updates as we go this season on the podcast, let you know what's happening. We'll probably do an episode at some point talking about, planning a vet practice and what goes into that, what we really thought about when it comes to pet owners and their experience as clients in our practice. And then most importantly, our patients, their pets, and their experience in our practice. So lots of exciting things to come there. I could talk about it all day, but that's not what we're going to talk about all day today. We're going to talk about a really good topic, a very important topic, and sometimes an uncomfortable topic for people. And that is obesity in our pets. I don't really know why this is an uncomfortable topic for some people. I do know somewhat why, but as a veterinarian who works in general practice myself, I try to be very transparent and forward about this topic because I do think it's so very important. And I think sometimes pet owners, they get a little offended when we're talking about their pet's weight. I don't know why some people feel that way, but they do. And sometimes pet owners get actually angry if we dare to tell them that their pet is overweight. So, if that's you and you feel like you've been offended by a veterinarian telling you that in the past, just know before we have this conversation that I promise they had your pet's best interest in mind and yours. And I think after you listen to this, if that's you, you'll understand why maybe they feel the need to tell you about it. So I do have a hot take when it comes to this topic. And my hot take is that your pet, your dog, mostly this applies to, does not need an edible reward when they go to the bathroom after they're potty trained. Because I have human children, and they're 4 and 6, and they have both been potty trained since they were anywhere from 1 to 2 years old. And I used to give them an M&M when they went on the potty. I don't do that anymore because they're potty trained. They don't need a reward for going to the bathroom, just like a general bodily function, and neither do pets. And the reason why I'm even saying that is because treats are calories, and calories add up. And so unless you're giving your dog a piece of ice as a reward for going to the bathroom, you're giving them calories, and it's really unnecessary. And I also recognize that can be a hard habit to break. But if you have a dog who's struggling with obesity and being overweight, and you are rewarding them with an edible caloric treat when they go to the bathroom, I'm just telling you, you don't need to do that anymore. They're not going to stop going to the bathroom outside if you stop doing that. All right, that's my hot take. Did you know that a lot of our pets are overweight? I think there are different figures, there are different studies, but we know that we have probably over 50% prevalence in our U.S. pets. So that means some studies say that at least 50% of dogs and at least 50% of cats in people's household are overweight. And many would say this is the most preventable disease that we see in our pets. And so it's very important that we talk about it. And it's not just what they look like, but our overweight dogs and our overweight cats have real health implications when it comes to that. And there are massive epidemiologic studies and data to support this. And so it is real. It is really not anything to argue about. There are a lot of overweight pets in the US. And there are a lot of factors that go into that, but I would venture to say that largely our pets are eating too many calories and they're not that active. And so the combination of those two things leads to a lot of obesity. We also know there is studies and a lot of research and evidence that tells us that dogs and cats who are overweight, they live shorter lives than dogs and cats who are at ideal body condition scores. So that's more evidence that this is really, really important. And if you're listening to this podcast episode and you have an overweight dog or an overweight cat, you can literally extend their lifespan simply by reducing their weight and getting them to an ideal body condition score. That's a pretty powerful thing. So that's why it's really important to me that we talk about it, that you hear about it, that you learn about it. We're gonna kind of talk about the implications, how it happens, how you know if that's the case, and how can we fix it. Okay. So let's talk about body condition score, which I've already mentioned a couple of times, and you might be thinking, what the heck are you talking about? So body condition scoring is a system that was developed in veterinary medicine to give us as veterinary professionals somewhat of an objective way to tell you if your dog or your cat is overweight. Because obviously, as you know, dogs and cats come in all different sizes and shapes, right? And so the number of pounds that they weigh is very not indicative of how in shape are they, or are they overweight? Because obviously a Yorkie is going to weigh, say, 8 pounds, and a Great Dane is going to weigh 140 pounds, and they may both be in good shape. So BCS score, we say for short, or BCS, body condition score, there are 2 different scales. So number systems, one is 1 to 5, the other is 1 to 9. I don't like and I don't use the 1 to 5 scale. I like the 1 to 9 scale because it's a lot more specific and it gives us, in my opinion, a more detailed kind of idea of where we are. So when your veterinarian or your veterinary technician looks at your dog or your cat, they're going to feel and watch different parameters to determine that score. Our ideal body condition score on a scale from 1 to 9 is going to be anywhere from 4 to 5. And I would say a lot of my patients are at least a body condition score of 6 out of 9 or higher. I see a lot of cats with a BCS of 8 out of 9, super overweight cats. I think there are some breeds of dogs and then a lot of cats. In the US, a lot of people just kind of assume an overweight cat is normal. And it isn't normal, but it is common. And certain breeds of dogs, like one of my own favorites, the Labrador Retriever, a lot of them are overweight and people are just used to seeing overweight labs. And when they see dogs like my dog, Cooper, who is an ideal body condition score, whose ribs I can feel, they think that something's wrong. Why is he so thin? And so some of this is just about retraining our mind that dogs should be lean and cats really should and can be lean. And so how can we achieve that? And what does that look like? So body condition score 4 to 5 in those patients, a couple things we look at. One is going to be their ribs in dogs, especially when we feel the sides of a dog's chest, we should be able to feel the ridges of their ribs. One way you can think about this is if you make a fist and you feel your knuckles on the back of your hand, that's about how easily you should feel your dog's ribs. Now, some of you are going, whoa, I haven't I haven't felt my dog's ribs like that since they were a puppy, because there's a layer of fat that covers those ribs. So if you feel their side and it's just like a soft, sweet little cushion there, their body condition score is going to be higher than a 5 out of 9. And I would venture to say it's probably a 7 or an 8. So once we get down to like a 6 out of 9, it's still not ideal, but you can start to feel the edges of those ribs. But then 4 to 5, they're going to be more prominent. You don't want it to be, really bony. You don't want to be able to see their ribs at all times. But in a lean dog who's a body condition score of a 4 or 5 out of 9, if they're like exercising, especially if they're wet, when they're breathing hard, you are going to be able to see their ribs to a certain degree. And that's normal and that's okay. Some people think that's a sign of a dog that's too thin, but it's not. They are okay. Another thing we look at when we are deciding on a body condition score is where else fat is deposited. One place is in the waist area. So when you look down at your dog from the top, their top line, it shouldn't be a straight line. It shouldn't be a round line. They shouldn't look like an ottoman. They should have a waist. So there should be a dip in the line over their back when you get behind their ribs. So you should be able to see a waist from the side and the top, and you should be able to feel it when you're holding them on the side. The same things apply to cats. We do evaluate that a little bit differently. Some people see the primordial pouch on a cat, which is that skin that kind of hangs down in front of their back legs, and they think, oh, that's an overweight cat. So that's sort of the nuance of being in a veterinary field, is knowing that can just be skin, but we feel for fat deposit along their waistline and then over their ribs. And there's some other kind of smaller nuanced things we look at, but for you as a pet owner, those are the big things I tell my clients to look for. Can you feel their ribs slightly, and do they have a waist, especially in a dog? And in a cat, do we have those areas that are lean, even if we have some extra loose primordial pouch skin in their lower abdomen? And then what their actual abdomen feels like. So overweight cats often, they have a very wide abdomen behind their ribs, and it's going to be congruent with that primordial pouch. And sometimes they're so overweight, you don't even notice that extra skin because they're just large. And so it all just kind of takes up some of that skin because they have more of a like distended sort of abdomen feel, because there is literal fat in their abdomen. So what happens? Why does it matter if our pets are overweight, and how does that connect to shorter lifespans? Well, the reason is there's a lot of classic research, very, very strong findings that link overweight cats and dogs with even specific diseases. So in cats, a really big disease we talk about that being obese directly can lead to is diabetes mellitus. So cats are different from dogs in general in that they can develop diabetes. And if you think about it in people, it's more like type 2 diabetes. So it's a result of them being overweight for an extended amount of time. And so these cats actually can, if they're diagnosed with diabetes early on, they can actually be put back into remission, and weight loss has a lot to do with that. Overweight cats are also at risk for another disease called hepatic lipidosis. And this is something we could talk about in an episode, but it's a dangerous liver issue when cats stop eating. And if they have a lot of fat already in their body, they're more likely to develop that. And it can be a deadly disease that puts them into liver failure. We do have studies that link overweight cats with lower urinary tract disease. We've talked about fluted here a bit. So inner or chronic inflammation, cystitis of their bladder and lower urinary tract. So there is a direct correlation to that. We also see a lot of cats who are overweight develop skin and hair issues because they're not grooming. So it's really important for cats to groom, right? If you've ever had a cat, they're grooming themselves a lot. And when cats become so overweight, they're unable to do that anymore from, like their chest down. And so that leads to matting. It can lead to skin infection. It can lead to other skin issues. So there's a direct correlation there as well. And then arthritis is osteoarthritis is a big risk factor when it comes to obesity for both dogs and cats. A lot of cats have arthritis. It's very underdiagnosed in cats, and cats that are carrying around extra weight, they're going to be more painful because of that. When we talk about dogs, what the evidence tells us is osteoarthritis and other musculoskeletal issues can be very directly linked to being overweight. In vet school, we always learned that one of the most effective treatments for obesity or for osteoarthritis and musculoskeletal issues in dogs is weight loss. So dogs who maybe have hip dysplasia or other sort of underlying musculoskeletal issues, they can get so much better with just weight loss alone so that they're not carrying around that extra weight. We also know that dogs can develop insulin resistance because of obesity. Their mobility is going to be reduced. Mobility is really, really important, especially in our dogs as they age. So increased weight along with normal aging in dogs can be a recipe for disaster. They become less mobile. They're carrying around extra weight. They may have some underlying arthritis, and it just compounds on itself. They're really painful. They're really uncomfortable, and it's going to be really hard for them to be mobile. If they're not very mobile, they're going to lose muscle mass. That's going to make it even harder for them to be mobile. And we know that sarcopenia, which is the loss of muscle mass in aging dogs, leads to more frailty, which leads to shorter lifespans and more concurrent issues. So this is how obesity, which sometimes we feel like isn't maybe a huge deal, can lead to really big deals and literally shorten the lifespan of our pets. So big things, big important things. We're not just talking about weight. We're talking about systemic disease and systemic health. And it's really, really important. So how do our pets become overweight? And I think there's some misconception about this for sure. Obviously, if they're eating too many calories, they're going to gain weight, just like any living being. Mammals, especially if they're eating too many calories, they're going to deposit fat and become become overweight, way too much. So there are some obvious predispositions when it comes to breeds of dogs that are more predisposed to becoming overweight or getting overweight more easily. Some of that is probably related to their level of satiation. So how easily do these dogs feel full and stop eating on their own? Labs, beagles are two breeds that come to mind where they're more prone to obesity, but I think some of that has to do with just the fact that those dogs literally often would eat themselves to death. And as we've talked about before, there's a gene now we've identified in Labrador Retrievers that makes their satiation sensitivity is really, really low. So they don't feel full even when they eat a lot. It's like Cooper. When he was a puppy, he broke into a cat food bin and ate like 4 pounds of cat food as like a 10-pound puppy and was in the ER all night, like with horrible food bloat. And I kid you not, the next day, he's like trying to eat the cat food again. So we do see some breed predilection for obesity. Another thing just about our dogs in general in the US, they're sedentary. A lot of our pets are home all day without us, so they're laying around. A lot of dogs, they were bred to work, to herd cattle and sheep and run around farms all day and do those things. And we've got those dogs are in people's apartments, right? And they're in people's houses all day long and they're just laying around, and they may go on a walk twice a day, but it doesn't even really count as exercise. So they're just sedentary. And then to compound on that, they're eating diets where when you look at a food bag, it tells you how many calories to feed for your dog. But often that feeding guide is telling you an amount to feed for a dog who's active. And most of you, I'm just telling you right now, your dog's lifestyle should not be considered active unless they're working, doing some type of sport, running miles with you on a weekly basis, or doing anything that's very active, lots of calories burned every day. Their lifestyle is not active. And so they don't need that many calories. This is why it's really important when you're deciding how much to feed your dog, you should definitely ask your veterinarian or your cat. Ask them, how much should I feed? Don't just go by the feeding guide on the bag. Some foods are going to be higher density of calories, depending on what they are, whether you're feeding fresh or kibble. There's just a lot of nuance that goes into it. We actually have literal calculations to tell you how many kilocalories you should feed your dog or your cat in a 24-hour time period. And your veterinarian should be able to calculate that for you. And then you can take that number and whatever you're deciding to feed, you can figure out how many cups of that food or grams you want to feed. So there is math to that. There is a formulation, a calculation for that. And so it is something we can actually figure out. So free feeding versus meal feeding. This is another way that I think we can lead to our patients becoming, or our pets becoming, more overweight. I see a lot of clients who are free feeding their dogs and especially their cats. The problem with free feeding is not necessarily that they're eating small amounts of food throughout the day. I don't really have a problem with that. My issue with free feeding is it's really, really hard to keep up with how much are they eating in a 24-hour period, right? Now, I suppose if you calculated how much they can eat in a day, you put it out in the morning and you take it away 24 hours later and reset, then you can get a better idea of how much they're eating. Free feeding, I think, also impedes on us being able to really tell what their appetite is. And so sometimes I think dogs who don't feel well and are sick, we don't learn that their appetite is decreased at first. It takes longer to figure that out. And so I think meal feeding can be helpful in that way. And then in cats, free feeding, again, most people that free feed their cats, they just sort of fill up their bowl when it's empty. So they have no idea how often or how much the cat is eating. And so we just don't know what their caloric intake is. It's really important in cats. I would say cat owners, even more than dog owners, just really have no idea how many calories their cats are eating in a day. So if you're free feeding your cat or your dog, I would consider switching to meal feeding. When you go from free feeding to meal feeding, it can be a little bit of a struggle, especially in picky-ish dogs. But you can do it. I just tell people you're not going to hurt your dog if they skip a meal. So I have people put food down, their morning amount, and then take it up in 30 minutes. And if the dog doesn't eat it, especially the first day, they're not going to. If they don't eat it all, they're going to learn, oh, if I don't eat it, it goes away. And so then they will just have to skip that meal. And then when you feed them in 12 hours at their dinner time or whatever, they're going to feel hungry. They're probably going to eat that up. And if that doesn't happen, it's usually by day 2 that they learn, I got to eat the food when it's down. So I personally, all veterinarians have a little bit different opinion about this. That's what my personal opinion is that meal feeding is better than free feeding. And I do think free feeding can contribute to overconsumption of calories in our pets. Treats. Let's talk about treats. Now, listen, I am the first girl to tell you, you should definitely order that fun treat for your dog or your cat. I don't want to deprive my patients of treats. But what's really important for people to understand is that treats can be really high in calories. And you think, oh, I just give them a couple of these little treats a day. But then when the treat is 20, 30 calories or more, and you feed 2 or 3 of them, then we're starting to talk about like a half a cup of food. And when it comes to the size of our pets, that's a lot of calories. Some vets will say, oh, feeding your dog a milk bone is like feeding them a Krispy Kreme donut. And I think that's a little bit dramatic, but I think it's a good analogy. So you look at this, kind of not very appealing biscuit that you're feeding your dog and you think, oh, no big deal. But when it comes to the proportion of calories to how much they're eating in a day, it turns out being a lot. And I tell people, don't anthropomorphize with your pet. Don't think about it as a human because they're not humans. But that is one place we can think about, all right, this treat looks like nothing, but it's like eating a whole sandwich as a treat. So would I eat a whole sandwich just like as a snack between lunch and dinner? Probably not. So probably shouldn't use it for our dogs either, or our cats. And, cats' little crunchy treats, those things add up real fast. So it's just something to think about and really pay attention to. Okay, how many calories are in these treats? And when you talk to your veterinarian about how many calories should my dog or my cat eat in a day, you want to include the treats they eat in that total number of calories. So let's say your vet says your dog can eat 500 kilocalories a day, and you feed them, let's say 3 treats or 4, let's say 4 treats, so I can do math, that are 25 calories each. So that subtracts 100 kilocalories from what they can eat in a day, which means when it comes to kibble, they should only be eating 400 kilocalories of kibble, if that makes sense. So you want to allot for their treats when you're talking about daily caloric intake. And when we really talk about trying to lose weight or help our pets lose weight, that's one place some people don't always realize is that treats need to count in that bin of calories that are allowed. There's also a lot of discussion on time of spay and neuter around obesity and weight management in our pets. And it's 1,000% part of the conversation and something we should be talking about. We already know that the way the body handles fat changes when we neuter and spay our dogs and our cats. Their metabolism changes because of the hormone changes. And that is an unavoidable fact. I think sometimes veterinarians don't want to talk about this because they're afraid it might discourage you from spaying or neutering. So hear me now. I'm not saying you shouldn't spay and neuter your dogs. That's a whole other nuanced conversation we've had before. We'll talk about more. But if and when you spay or you neuter your dog, or when you spay and neuter your cat, you should know that the way they metabolize fat is going to change because of the hormone changes. And so you should be accounting for that when you're calculating the calories that they eat in a day. And your veterinarian can also help you with that. So the formulation that we use to calculate calories per day, that's going to be higher in an intact dog. So not neutered, not spayed, their metabolism is faster and better. And so they can eat more calories in a day. Once that changes, there is now studies that tell us that those changes happen within 48 hours of spaying and neutering, which means I personally, as a GP veterinarian, am starting to talk to owners about going ahead and either changing their diet or just changing their daily intake even before we spay or neuter them, so that we don't have any risk of gaining weight after that, especially because after we do surgery like spay or neuter in a dog, they're going to be even more sedentary than normal if you're following our directions for the next week. So that just compounds that. So it's not that spaying or neutering makes them overweight. I want to be very clear. It doesn't make them overweight. It just makes it easier for them to become overweight. And if you don't change the amount of calories that they're eating in a day, then they probably will be. So we want to decrease that, and your vet can help guide you on that. I also want to recognize that if your dog or your cat are used to eating, these treats all day long or this much food twice a day, it can be really hard to break that habit. Just like in people who, addiction to food is a real thing in humans, and feels really good for us to eat food. And the same is true of a lot of our pets. They like to eat. Obviously, we know a lot of dogs and cats like to eat. And so I think it's important to recognize that if you're trying to help your dog or your cat lose weight, that the process of decreasing their intake of calories can be difficult. And it's hard to deny our pets of treats that they really like. So something I talk to clients about a lot is finding lower calorie options. So, if you do give your dog a treat every time they go to the bathroom and you want to keep doing that, you don't have to. But if you want to keep doing that, let's find a low calorie swap. Instead of that actual, biscuit treat they're getting, maybe we do a blueberry or a green bean or some type of fresh food or dried jerky type meat treat that's lower in calorie, or a training treat that's got flavor, but it's like 1 calorie per treat. So it's really about numbers. It's about figuring out how many calories are they eating in a day and how can we decrease that. So weight loss in our pets is important if they're overweight, and we want to do it the right way. So we can cause our pets to lose weight too fast. This is another thing that your vet can help guide you through. When we see like morbidly obese pets, we should be making plans with their owners of, okay, here's how fast we should be losing weight. So, it's the calculation is like a percentage of their body weight per week or per month. And so we should be able to map that out for you and help by decreasing their caloric intake, sometimes a bit at a time. We never want to just like completely like cut their calories in half or how much their volume they're getting in half. But we want to decrease the amount. We want to do it in a reasonable way, and we want to get to a goal. Another thing that I talk to owners about a lot, this is like a classic scenario. How much do you feed your dog? Well, I feed him 2 cups a day. Okay. Are they measured cups? And sometimes people get annoyed if I put like, okay, what do you mean by a cup? But the reason is so many times people will tell me I feed them a cup twice a day. And when they say a cup, they mean a solo cup. And a solo cup is more like 3 to 4 measured cups of food, not 1 measured cup of kibble. And if you're feeding dry kibble, it's always more than you think it is. If you're eyeballing how much kibble you're feeding them, I guarantee you, like when you go home and measure, take what you normally feed them, what you eyeball, put it in a measuring cup, and I guarantee it's more than what you think it is. And so this is one thing I encourage clients to do is actually measure. If we decide 1 cup of that dry kibble twice a day is what they should eat, you're going to fill up that measuring cup and you're going to level it off. Not a mounded heaping cup, a leveled off cup. These are sort of like small nuanced things where those calories can really, really add up. And then when I told you that we should account for treats when we talk about calories, the number of calories that treats fall in that category for the calories per day should be 10% of less. So back to the example of your dog can have 500 kilocalories of food a day. You should have 50 calories or less should be the amount of treats that they have, or toppers, or whatever is not their properly formulated diet, whether that's fresh food or dry food. So less than 10% of their daily calories come from treats. And of course, we want to increase activity. Increasing activity is not necessarily going to really burn a lot of calories unless we're doing some type of, like I said, work, job, intense running. Increasing activity is not going to be a big driver in losing weight. What it is going to do is help to develop and maintain better muscle mass. That's going to help your pet just in general. And we know that in dogs, at least, it will literally help them live longer if they have well-developed muscle mass and we keep them lean when it comes to fat and body condition score. And then another thing I will tell people when we're trying to lose weight in our pets is just weighing them often and just keeping an eye on what their weight is doing. And if you have a big dog and you can't weigh them at home, hopefully your veterinary office, it's like, yeah, come by anytime and we can weigh your dog. Because I think it's important to see, what's working, what isn't working, what's their weight doing, and do we need to feed less? Do we need to feed more? Sometimes we can overdo it. Sometimes our dogs get too thin, or cats, and we want to just adjust that. And I also tell people that every dog and every cat is different, right? Just like people, what works for one person to lose weight efficiently isn't going to work for the next person. And the same thing goes for our pets. So it's just another thing to realize that even if we say, okay, your dog should be eating this many calories a day and that's all you feed them and they're still overweight, well, we probably need to feed less. Other things we think about when that's the case, is there something else going on? There are some endocrine diseases that can prevent our dogs and our cats, mostly dogs, from losing weight the way we need them to. The main one I think about is thyroid disease. It's always a good idea to consider hypothyroidism if you're doing these things, if you're feeding an appropriate number of calories and your dog is just not losing weight. Hypothyroidism is definitely something we think about. A lot of people want to blame their dog being overweight on hypothyroidism, and they really want us to check their thyroid levels, and we will, but a lot of the time if weight is the only clinical sign of thyroid disease, that's not actually the problem. But it's definitely always something we think about, especially if you're doing all the things and you're having trouble with them losing weight. And then again, just like a common thing we talk about when it comes to weight loss, I find this also, especially in cats, particularly difficult, is when you have multi-pet households and you've got two dogs. One is a chunkamunka and the other one is just naturally lean, stays lean. And you're trying to help one lose weight and the other one, you want to maintain their weight. That can be difficult. That's why another reason why meal feeding is really important, especially in multi-pet households. So again, how much each dog is eating. Sometimes feeding them in separate places is really helpful so that, one doesn't steal the other's food and you can just keep them separated while they eat. And then they've had their food. And in cats, it can be really difficult with multi-cat households. You can get feeders that have what is the word I'm trying to say? Like correlate with a tag on the cat's collar. So like when this cat walks up to the feeder, it gives them this amount. And when this cat walks up, it gives them that amount. It's so smart. We have these things. There's technology for this. So there are some really great kind of techie solutions for that. But again, it requires dedication on your part as a pet owner. So I am just acknowledging that can be difficult. And we're busy, our schedules are busy. So there are ways to make this easier, but it's really, really important. When we talk about exercise, it's easy to talk about exercise in dogs because you can always, take your dog out to run or walk or play fetch or whatever. Cats, it's more difficult. And I recognize that. There are some great ways to provide movement and enrichment for cats inside. Cat trees and cat towers, one really great way to do that. If you have the space and the ability to set up a catio for your cat, that's another great option. Laser pointers, other toys that make cats run around. Ways to hide food, kibble in different places where your cat has to run around and hunt to find it. These are ways you can help your cat get more exercise even when they live inside. This was a lot. I'm looking over my outline that I made for you guys because I came prepared. I just want to make sure I'm kind of covering all the things. The big picture is that a lot of you have overweight pets, and some of you have a veterinarian who's mentioned it to you, and some of you have not been told that. And I think some of that is because your vet is probably tired of people being mad at them for saying that their pet is overweight. But it's a real issue. It's connected to disease, and it's connected to literally a shorter lifespan. There's a lot of people talking about how you need to help your pet live longer. A lot of food companies that make food they tell you is fancier and better and that's going to make your pet live longer. And the most effective thing you can do is keep your pet lean, keep them cared for by your veterinarian, do preventative care, keep them at a healthy body condition score, keep them active so they have a good muscle mass. Those are the most important things you can do for them. And something else that I see, many of you know, I'm a big fan of fresh, whole cooked food options for our dogs and our cats. And there's more and more commercially available options, which I'm really excited about. What I am not excited about is a lot of the marketing that goes into these companies. It's frustrating for me to see because while I think there are some great benefits of feeding fresh but cooked foods, if they're formulated properly and they're given properly, even as toppers, I think they can be really great for a lot of reasons. But those foods are not making pets lose weight, period. So just eating a different type of food, different formula of food, like a fresh food rather than a dry food, no matter what these food companies tell you, that does not make your dog lose weight or your cat lose weight. Weight loss happens from decreased caloric intake. And I don't care what Joe Schmo with that food company says, the math is not mathing if they tell you it's anything other than calories. Now, what I do find is that one reason I do like fresh cooked foods is that they're less calorically dense, meaning the volume of food that a dog or a cat needs to eat of a fresh food to get the same number of calories as a dry food is a lot higher, right? Because the food is not dehydrated, it's fresh, it's got a lot of moisture in it. So it literally takes up more space when they consume it. And so I do think that helps with them feeling more full with a smaller amount of calories. Does that make sense? So if you take like a cup of fresh food and then a measured cup of dry food, the amount of calories in the dry food is going to be way higher than the amount of calories in the fresh food. And that's not because the fresh food itself is superior and so they are not eating as many calories. It's just because it's literally less dense. So they need to eat more volume of that fresh food, but that can help them feel, in my opinion, it can help them feel more full. So I do think that that is a benefit. It's one thing I talk to cat owners about when I'm trying to help cats lose weight. I do like to look at wet and canned foods because that water, I mean, you know, if you drink a glass of water before you eat food, you feel more full when you're eating. So I do think that that can apply for our pets as well. But it's something that I hope you take seriously. I hope it's something you're thinking about for your pets. I love when a pet owner is like, last time I saw you, she weighed 42 pounds and today she weighs 43 pounds. And should we be worried about that? I would much rather someone be hyper about that than offended when I tell them that that same dog who weighs 55 pounds and they should weigh 40 pounds needs to lose weight, because people really, they get offended. But don't be offended. We care about your pet. We want them to be healthy. And when we look at your pet in an exam, what I typically do, I give them a body condition score, then I weigh them. I say their body condition score is a 7 out of 9. I have no idea what the number on the scale is. But once we figure that out, I can then calculate for them how much they need to lose to get to their ideal weight based on what their body condition score is. So that's the convo you should be having with your vet to figure out, does my dog or my cat need to lose weight? How much do they need to lose? And how can we do that? And I hope that they can help you do that. There's also, I've wanted to mention some supplements now that can help them feel more full with their food. You also can get weight loss over-the-counter diets. So there are a lot of weight management, OTC, dry foods. These and really those foods are less calorically dense. So they eat more volume of food for less calories. So same kind of idea. But again, you have to just be really careful about how you're feeding that. Let your vet help you formulate how much of that they should get. And then if you didn't know, there are prescription diets that literally help pets lose weight. One is metabolic. It can be super helpful for cats. I've seen this in practice. It is not cheap. I think there's other ways to effectively do it, but I definitely have cat clients who just have had a really hard time with helping their cat lose weight. They get them on a metabolic prescription food and it works. So it's another option to chat with your vet about. I hope this is helpful. I would love to know what questions you have. Shoot me a DM, send us an email. Let us know if you have follow-up questions for this. I'm excited to hear what you think. And if you're watching this, know that you can always listen to the podcast on all podcast platforms and vice versa. If you're listening, you can always watch this on YouTube if you want to see me while I talk to you. And I'm excited for you to tune in next week and make sure you're following us on all of our socials, Dr. Molly Says Pod. And I'll see you next week on the Dr. Molly Says podcast.